Hello, and welcome to another Walkie Talkie. A bitterly cold Wednesday, so you'll have to forgive my snuffling. It'd be nice when the weather warms up and I can come out without feeling like I'm freezing to death, like that. Anyway, everything went well at my hospital appointment yesterday, so I put that to bed and crack on and do this walkie-talkie now. Superior Inferiority. Came up with a topic. In general, it's what old games would I like to see remade, possibly in 3D. And that's a really good topic. He also mentioned about talking about Quake, which is also a really good topic because that's another game series that I enjoy. Very much enjoy those games. In fact, I remember briefly just touching on that, wishing that they had released Quake a few years before they did. Like they'd re-release it because they've been doing it with Doom for a number of years. Well, Quake seemed to get neglected for a while. Always frustrated me. Anyway, we'll get to that. But yeah, I thought that was a really good couple of topics to discuss there. Now, what I think I'll split it over 2 days. Because I think I can get two good chats out of that. So like today and tomorrow's walk, I can talk about them. Magpie gobbing off. So yeah, thanks for the topics. It's much appreciated. It makes doing these walks, or these walkie-talkies, not the walks, because I can do them anyway, but it makes doing that, makes doing them easier, a hell of a lot easier when you've got something to talk about. Thankfully the water's subsiding a bit. It was raining last night. I could hear it quite a bit, so thankfully that subsided. So yeah, we'll get on to that. There are a few games actually, and there's some that even did get the 3D treatment that I would like to see redone, or at least re-released and enhanced for modern systems. And there were Amiga games that were first-person shooters. They were actually really good, but were a bit hampered by the limitation of the Amiga hardware. But I think that they would do really well getting a modern day makeover. So there are some there that I want to chat about. But yeah, so we'll see how we go with that. As usual with a lot of these things, you kind of start to think a little bit more as you go along. Now, I've got a new post about Ghosts podcast episode coming out later this week, in the next day or so, hopefully. And I was talking about tech ghost hunting tech. I had quite a bit of fun making that episode, and we recorded it yesterday, and had a lot of fun making it and talking about it. I'm one of these people, I like tech, but I don't know an awful lot about it. I just like gadgets. I don't really know as much as I should, but it's all good, isn't it? Anyway, pretty much at that point, as usual, where I sign off. Hopefully, well, not hopefully, unless I get blown up. I'll see you in the park. Oh, weirdo. Well, that was weird. I just discovered a feature on this camera that if I hit the record button without powering it on, it will go straight into record mode, actually start recording, turn itself on and everything. And then when I stop, it shuts itself down. So it's like a quick start. I didn't know that. Problem is, when I do stop the recording, it does shut itself down. So, but yeah, it's a handy old thing to know. Anyway, the things you discover when you head on out. Right. So, the topic of what games would I like to see remade, remastered. Well, this is going to be a little bit of a cheat because Superior Inferiority did give a couple of examples like Commander Keen. Yeah, I'd like to see a 3D version of that. The problem is a lot of the 2D games did get 3D makeovers. I mean, Duke Nukem, I think he started life in 2D, and then they did Duke Nukem 3D. Sonic, Mario, those are your big obvious ones. They went into 3D many moons ago. So, yeah, I mean, it's a tough one on that front. There were some, I suppose, I could go back to certain games from the past, like specific titles, but the problem is that they kind of did end up in 3D, just in different games. So when I was thinking about this, I thought, well, maybe I can cheat a little bit while I sort of get a string of thoughts together. That wind is bitingly cold, by the way. Good Lord. So yeah. So I thought, well, hang on, let me start with games that were maybe already in 3D, but were on tech that it was struggling with, or, maybe not struggling with, but could do with a modern day release. Get Night Dive Studios on them to weave their magic, because what they do really well, what I love about Night Dive, is they take an old game and they make it run on new systems, and they make it playable using modern controls, what they will call quality of life improvements. So you can use like a joypad with it, your dual analog and stuff. And they've done that with a considerable number of games, and they've done a great job because they retain the original feel. They might sharpen up the graphics, but it's the same game. It's not a remake. It's not a from the ground up remake. And I like that. I like what they do with it. So, first of all, I would give it to them But there was a series of games on the Amiga that a few years ago they did get a release on modern systems, or they got a release on the Xbox. I think on the PS3 as well, I'm not sure. But also on PC, and I have them on PC. And that series is Alien Breed. Now, there was a number of Alien Breed games, and they were damn hard, but they were really good. On the Amiga, there was Alien Breed. I think they did a remaster of it. I think it was Alien Breed 92 or something. It's just not really a remaster. It was just like an enhanced version. And then they did another Alien Breed 2 and Alien Breed Tower Assault. Now these were all top-down shooters, but they were really, really good. I say they were hard as hell, but they were really good. But they did do a 3D version, a first-person shooter version, and this was called Alien Breed 3D. And they did two of these, Alien Breed 3D, obviously, and Alien Breed 3D 2, and they were excellent. But being on the Amiga and being a first-person shooter, which the Amiga wasn't really cut out for, in all fairness to it, they were a bit rough. And the games were, to get it to run well on a standard Amiga, you were looking at it being in quite a small window, and obviously quite low res. Quite low resolution on the graphics, but they did a really good job. Team 17 did a very good job with it. So I'd love to see a modern update for that, not a remake, but an update with higher resolution graphics and a modern control system. Now, if you get the Amiga 500 Mini, Alien Breed 3D is actually on there, and you can use the controller that comes with it, and it will play perfectly well with that controller. But it feels a little bit weird trying to play a first-person shooter without dual analog controls. Now, it's as good as you're going to get, because the 500 Mini will emulate more powerful Amigas. So what you get on there is as good as you're going to get using Amiga emulation. But what I would like to see is that game brought to life, and its sequel, on modern consoles, and on PC, where the far greater power will mean you're able to play the game with a lot smoother frame rates and at a higher resolution. So I'd love to see that, because it was a great game. It was a great first-person shooter, and in an age where I was desperate to play Doom, but I didn't have the computer. I didn't have a PC at the time, and this was before I got the 32X. It was a brilliant way of playing, which leads me on to my next game, which is a game called Fears, and that was another first-person shooter on the Amiga. Now, this run even worse on my Amiga. I've spoken about this before. I mean, we're talking like having to run this in a really small window to get any kind of performance out of it. that was playable, and it was a very good game. And again, I think having that game on a, given a modern update on a modern system, I think would be great. I think it would be, a brilliant addition. It would be nice to see the game, I suppose as the developers originally intended it. I'm pretty sure that they didn't intend for it to be on a, viewed on a small window. I'm sure that they would have wanted it to be, full screen, or certainly a much larger presentation than what we got. So, I would really like that. I would really like to see it brought up to date on the modern systems. And then to complete that trilogy was a first-person shooter, again on the Amiga, and I've spoken about this before, and I think that this is an absolute marvel, and that is Gloom. Gloom is an awesome first-person shooter on the Amiga. It was the one that was the most impressive from a technical perspective. You could play that in a much larger window. Its performance was very, very good. I had an Amiga 1200. It's just a standard Amiga 1200, and it ran superbly on that. And again, I think it would benefit from, running to its full potential, seeing it at its full potential on modern hardware, using modern control systems. So, yeah, I'm very, very much in the camp of seeing those three games. They would be my go-to ones. Now, I know it's a little bit of a cheat, but apart from Gloom, which did run really well, the other two certainly ran very poorly on a standard Amiga 1200. Very poorly indeed. It struggled. The good thing about the 500 Mini is it will emulate beyond a 1200 in terms of performance. I know this because Alien Breed 3D runs miles better on the 500 Mini than it did on my Amiga 1200. So whether it goes all the way up to like a top range Amiga, I don't know. But the performance of those certainly is as good. Playing them on the 500 Mini is as good a performance as I've ever seen them. But it would be nice to see a higher resolution. I mean, obviously you're limited by the resolutions, draw distances, and all of that stuff, and frames per second. You're limited by what they were coded for originally. That's why I think a remaster, where it can take advantage of pushing those things higher, it would be great. I really would like to see it. So they would be the first three out of the gate. Platform games, like I say, my favourite platform games have already been done. And here's the thing as well, it's like one of my others would be Alien 3. That was one of the best games on the Mega Drive. It was also a great game on the Super Nintendo, but I didn't play it as much as I did on the Mega Drive because I didn't have a Super Nintendo. So I would have loved to have seen a 3D version of that, but we kind of got that with the Alien trilogy. on the PlayStation, and it came out on the Saturn as well, but I had it on the PlayStation. So that would be another game that I would like to see, just to be honest with you, just re-released, would be Alien Trilogy and Alien Resurrection. They were two awesome games on the original PlayStation that I had. They were brilliant. Can't get them now. Well, I mean, you can if you've got a PlayStation or a Saturn. I don't know whether Resurrection come out on the Saturn, but Alien Trilogy did. But I think it was better on the PlayStation. I played two versions. I just found the PlayStation version. Maybe it was just familiarity with the controller, but I enjoyed it more on the PlayStation. It was better suited to 3D games than the Saturn was overall. The Saturn really needed to be, in the hands of somebody who knew what they were doing with it. PlayStation, I think, was a little bit easier to wring performance out of. So again, I think it was awesome couple of games. And again, I think I covered it in my video when I was talking about licensing issues. They've almost been consigned to the dustbin of history because of that. I mean, there would be brilliant games to re-release now, and I think they'd sell really well. I do. I think they'd sell really well. So again, that's another couple. Speaking of the PlayStation, there's another first-person shooter, and again, this is one you never really hear mentioned much, but I had it back in the day and it was fantastic, and that's Life Force Tenka. That was a great first-person shooter. That really pushed the PlayStation hardware. So yeah, I absolutely loved it. I'd love to see a remaster of that. I say, whether or not you, I don't know what the script is with the licensing for that. I've got a feeling it's probably, well, I can't see it being, it's probably just out there, like, not what they would call abandonware, but just sort of in some sort of limbo. That was a brilliant game. So yeah, I mean, I say it's a little bit of a cheat, but I think it's still something that I would like to see redone. I don't want a remake, just want a remaster. Like they did with Power Slave, or Exhumed. It was known as both. I think it was Exhumed in the UK, and I think it was Power Slave in the US. I think. Now, I suspect the reason why it had a name change here in the UK might be to do with the Iron Maiden album, which was called Power Slave. It's possibly to do with that. So yeah. That's what I'm saying. They took the game. It's still that game. So yeah, I think that was probably why there was a name change to it. But they did a great job with that. It still looks, feels, plays like the original, but with modern control systems. With the dual analogues, or the keyboard and mouse if you're on PC. And that's what I'm talking about, when I talk about these remasters. I don't want any of these games completely remade, because you destroy a lot of what is the selling point of those games, which is to play an old game on a modern system. You know, officially, legally, you know, license intact, not going to some dodgy abandonware place and hoping to God that your computer doesn't explode after downloading it from there. So yeah, what else have we got? So I think that just probably covers that. Because to be honest with you, there's a lot of first-person shooters from that era that have been given the night dive treatment. The Turok games, the original Turok trilogy, they've been done. I wonder if Night Dive will venture into the later ones that came out on the original Xbox. Was it Turok Evolution? And then there was a Turok reboot that came out on the 360. I'd like to see Evolution get the treatment. I think that's the one that was on the original Xbox and PS2. I'm not sure though. The one that was just called Turok, I don't know whether it was supposed to be a remake or whatever. I didn't like that as much as the others. It became a little bit bland for me, that one. Maybe it would benefit from a remake, but it wasn't as interesting to me. It was a good game, but it was a bit more generic. Yeah, the Turok games were, they were a bit different. That felt a little bit more generic, which was a reflection at the time of, all games were kind of like that was coming out. I believe they're doing some third-person online co-op version of Turok. Well, that's a big miss for me. That's not Turok. That's not what it was. So that'll be a no-no for me. I'm not interested in that. Online only. In other words, a game rental. Not interested. That wind. Oh God, I feel a few spots of rain as well there. Anyhow. Not great. So what else? So I thought, well, like I say, the issue really is that these old games, they're like Mario and Sonic, already had the 3D treatment. When, they still release some 2D versions of them, but the main games are in 3D now. You look at like the awesome Super Mario Odyssey, Sonic Adventure, really good. It was a good showcase for the Dreamcast at the time. When the Dreamcast come out, I'd actually already gone, my feet were planted firmly in the Sony camp. But I tell you, Sonic Adventure, if I'd have had the money, I would have got a Dreamcast for that. I remember just being blown away. But of course, it ultimately did get released on other platforms. When Sega decided to go multi-platform and ditch being a hardware company. So let me think. Just have a little wander back in time, I suppose. I suppose I could go back to the 8-bit days. What was there then? I would have to say a game like Turrican. Thing is, although it's not quite a Metroidvania game. It's just more of a platform shooter. It would actually not. Well, what I'm saying is it would get the comparisons going on there. That's for certain. So, yeah, I would definitely say something like Turrican. I do have the. They re-released it again on modern systems. The Turrican Anthology Collection is two. But actually, weirdly enough, there's three. One appears to be like a highlight, like a sizzle reel of the first and second anthologies, and then you've got the actual anthology games themselves, 1 and 2. And we'll go back this way. Yeah, you got like these anthology games. So again, like, they're really good. A bit pricey though, but good. Now, they've recently released, and again it's a bit pricey for what you get, but the Last Ninja collection, which is basically I think you get the Spectrum, the C64. I don't know if you get the Amstrad and Amiga versions or ST versions if they came out on the ST, I don't know. It does say you get multiple versions, and I have seen a screenshot from what is clearly the Spectrum version as well as the C64 version of the Last Ninja. Again, it's a little bit pricey, but you do get International Karate and IK Plus, which was International Karate Plus, its sequel. One of the few beat-em-ups that I actually enjoyed playing on the back in the day on the C64. Way of the Exploding Fist, Fist 2, which was its sequel, which was quite a bit different to Exploding Fist. IK and IK Plus. Now, I'll tell you what's going to be weird. Be interesting actually with the International Karate, if they still have the music, because when that come out, I don't know if it was ever officially licensed, but the music to that game was actually, they ripped the music, which I shouldn't say that because it actually might have been legitimate, but this often happened back in the 80s, where games would, people weren't as funny about licensing issues with their games in terms of music. But yeah, the music is actually the same, if not extraordinarily similar to the music from the movie Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence by Ryuichi Sakamoto. And I would be amazed if it hasn't had to either drop the music or change that music altogether, or if it is actually licensed. Because, yeah, you wouldn't get away with that today without paying a license. Absolutely not. Sakamoto was in that. Was in the movie. By the way, if you've never seen that film, I love it. I think it's a great film about prisoners of war, Japanese prisoners of war in World War II. Some people don't like it, but I really enjoyed it. It was different. It's got David Bowie in it. And I think, oh my God, what's his name? Conte. Oh God, I've forgotten his first name. Anyway, yeah, he's in it. And it's brilliant. There's some brilliant performances in it. Now, some people might not like that film, but I absolutely loved it. I remember watching it, and my dad bought it on VHS tape back in the 80s. and it was quite an impactful film. It really was. It sort of explores how cruel humans can be to each other, and it's, in certain environments. How people can be pushed. But it's also, what the powerful message of it is about forgiveness, even in the face of that kind of horror. And that was very impactful to me. Growing up, there's a lesson there to be learned. When you watch it, at the age I was probably in my very early teens. You're watching it and you're thinking, how the hell, I would never forgive. And it's very complex. And when you watch it again when you get older, you realise it's actually very powerful. I've gone off on one of my randoms, haven't I, with this, but anyway, yeah. If you've not seen it, I recommend you do see it. I know some people didn't like it. Maybe it was because they didn't like the theme. The theme back then was always about sort of murderous revenge. You want them to break out and start machine gunning everybody, but obviously that's not what happens. What happens is completely it is the complete opposite, and in many respects it's probably a little bit more realistic. But back in the 80s, we wanted to see bombs and explosions and people running around on fire and stuff. So I think that was probably why some people didn't like it. I don't think they got what it was supposed to be about. This wasn't Chuck Norris in Missing in Action, or Rambo First Blood Part 2. And those movies are great, by the way. I love those films. But there's room for all sorts of different types. Anyway. The hell was I saying? Oh yeah, Last Ninja. That would probably be a cool 3D remake. The only problem I would have with that, it would have to be a game that I would think would be a little bit like, was it Mirror's Edge? Is that it, the parkour game? I only played the first one because being the fact that you're a ninja, if you were doing it in first person, it becomes a little bit more tricky. It's easier in third person, but in first person it's a lot more tricky. And some of the things with The Last Ninja were like pixel perfect jumping. There's a very notorious part of that game where you're crossing a river and you've got these like little smooth black rocks you've got to jump onto, and by God, you had to get it right. It was pixel perfect because if you touched the water, you were dead. So, yeah, I would say that it would be tricky to make first person. I would suggest third person for that, or certainly interchangeable. But yeah, a new version of that would be interesting. That's for certain. There's some other games as well. But again, like, the thing is, this has already been done. I mean, you could say with The Last Ninja, that has been done. They have made 3D ninja games. You've got Ninja Gaiden, and although that's more action orientated, where Last Ninja was more puzzle orientated. But I'd still like to see it you know, kept in the same spirit as Last Ninja. But like I say, there already have been 3D ninja games out, so it's one of them, isn't it? You know, what do you do? You know, where do you draw the line? So yeah, where are we at? Go on for a little bit longer, I think. I say, what I'll do tomorrow, I'll talk about Quake. I do have quite a bit I like to talk about Quake. I do love those games. But yeah. So yeah, I'm just trying to think now. I'm sort of running through my catalogue of games. You see, here's another one. I would say Ghostbusters, but that's already been done. And that has already been remastered and re-released as well. So you had Ghostbusters on the C64, but then you had a Ghostbusters game which was like pretty much the third movie that came out on like the PS3 and the Xbox 360, and then it was remastered again for the generation after that, and that's a superb game. So again, that's pretty much been done, but I'm going to go for a couple, and why I think these are going in the Wayback Machine, and there's no chance these would be made today. But these were some old US Gold games that I had when I first got my C64, and I absolutely love these games. I will play these games to death today. The first one is Raid Over Moscow. That game actually did create a bit of a stir at the time, not much. The games were nowhere near the size and the scope that they are today. I mean, at the time I didn't really remember much in a way of it. You know, it was probably like somebody maybe wrote into a magazine and said games like this won't do much for Western relations with the Soviet Union, and that was probably it. It might have been a bit more than that, but I think what they did was they just changed the name to Raid, but it was still the same game. They just changed it to Raid. But yeah, that was a great game, and that kind of had certain sections that were pseudo 3D. There was then other sections which were hang on a minute, things on top of the microphone, there we go. God, I hope that hasn't been messing with the mic all this time. A little cord from my top here, off my hood, off my top, was resting on top of the mic. Oh great. Well, I hope it hasn't knackered it up, because I'm not doing all this again. Yeah, I'd like to see that, like the first bit where you're guiding your jet fighter out of a hangar orbiting the Earth. That was kind of in 3D, somewhat. So yeah, and then when you actually do your sort of approach to the base that you've got to hit with missiles and stuff. Let's go back this way, there's a few people over there. That's like a side-on, you know. Had some like 3D elements because you were controlling, the height of your spaceship, but it was kind of, pseudo 3D. Obviously back then it really wasn't. And then, when you get to the end of the game, you have a bit where you got a rocket launcher, and you're behind this wall, and you're basically shooting. Got these people coming the other way now. Oh, I think we'll wrap this up soon. It's getting quite busy in here. Anyway, so yeah, that's sort of over the shoulder view, and then you've got the end bit where you're in the reactor and you're throwing this disc to hit this robot, and you kind of got to bounce this disc off the back wall so it hits the robot. So you'd have a little marker on the back wall, and you have to try to get the robot into the right position. The technique, of course, is you throw the disc, because if it hits the front of the robot, it doesn't do any damage. And once your disc gets past a certain point, you move and the robot will track you, and then you bounce that disc off the back wall and it hits the robot. That would be awesome. Again, you would have to make the game bigger. These games were not very long, so you would have to expand on the game somewhat. This game probably took about half an hour to finish, and then it would cycle back round and you would start again. So you've that. You then got the next is a couple of games also released by US Gold, also from when I got the Commodore 64, and that was the Beachhead games, Beachhead 1 and 2, and these were superb. In the first game, they were very different in terms of what you had to do in the games, like the layouts and stuff like that for the missions, the levels. The sequel Beachhead 2 is a lot different. It's in the same spirit, but it's a lot different. These varying different game sections. There's one where you start out moving your fleet, and you have a choice of whether to go through these caverns that's got mines and torpedoes being shot at you, guide your fleet through there. It's high risk but quicker. Or you can go sort of the long way around, and if you do that, you catch the enemy fleet by surprise. So the subsequent level becomes considerably easier. If you go the long way, the enemy fleet engage you. So you're on the defensive. They've already got a drop on you. And then you have a section whereby you come under aerial assault from the enemy fleet. So you have to, you're on anti-aircraft guns. And then the next bit is like battleships, except, you're not calling out grid references. You are actually a naval gunner shooting at the enemy fleet. And they're shooting back at you, and you've got to got to judge the distances. You have grid references, but you just use the joystick to move the guns left and right, and if you press forward and back, that changes the elevation. I got to a point, I played that game that many times, and knew the exact elevation to shoot at for each of the enemy ships, so I could actually take out all of the enemy ships really quickly. And of course, they're shooting back at you, and the longer you take, you'll start to get hit, and you get hit, you lose a life. Absolutely brilliant game. Beachhead 2 was considerably different. You could play as the good or the bad guys in that one. Certainly, I imagine you could play two-player as well. I don't know, because I only ever played it single-player. And again, there's differences. That actually had digitized speech in Beachhead 2. And again, I got that at the same time I got the C64. And yeah, I got Beachhead as well, and Beachhead 2, and Raid Over Moscow. Like I say, I got quite a few games that Christmas with the C64, and those games my sister had on hers. So they knew what to get me, because I enjoyed playing them. So I didn't get any duff games with that C64 when I got it, because people knew the games I enjoyed. And so between my mum and dad and my sister, not only did I get the computer, but I got quite a healthy collection. So yeah, I'd like to see that remastered as well. Again, there was different gameplay elements where you're in a a machine gun turret and you're shooting at guys coming at you. Or you could take the other side where you're sort of guiding your soldiers past the machine gun. So you're guiding your characters towards you as you're looking at the screen. At the bottom of the screen is the machine gun that's going to shoot you guys. And what you have to do is guide them behind a series of walls. And then you would have to commit to taking you guys over the walls. Sometimes if you got a guy, he would run out. You could run him out, throw a grenade. If you get the distance right, he destroys the gun, but quite often he'd end up being shot. But in the process of that, you could run another couple of guys to the wall. And once you got enough guys to the wall, then it was on to the next level. So it was stuff like that. The next level, you have to guide your sort of wounded soldiers out of the battle area, past all of these booby traps and stuff. And in that level, you're on a machine gun shooting the enemy, and these like tanks, a little sneaky bugger, he comes along with a little trapdoor, places a mine in front of your guy, so you got to shoot him, shoot the mine. You can shoot him before he lays the mine, that's always preferable. You got a guy on the wall dropping, looks like rocks or something down. Very hectic. But I was pretty good at that game. I was pretty good at getting all my guys across the screen. The trick was to go short bursts on the machine gun and slight readjustments. Don't be hammering the joystick, because then you would overcorrect. And when you're firing your gun, it would actually leave marks in the ground, so you could get to a point where those marks stayed in the ground, so you knew where to shoot when the things would come back across. So it was like a learning process, really. It was a good memory test. So yeah, that'd be another one that I'd like to see done. So I'm going into the Wayback Machine there. And obviously, you could say, well, you've got modern games like Call of Duty and stuff, but I'm talking about specifically a remake of that, using 3D. I'm not talking about, adaptation. I'm talking about a remake in those cases, because they were great games, a lot of fun to play. And I suppose I've covered these before. I wouldn't necessarily, one of them already is in 3D, that's Road Rash. We've had like Road Redemption, isn't it, and Road Rage or something. They were okay, but the original Road Rash, just the exact game, but with modern graphics. That's it. No other nonsense, just that game with modern graphics. That's all I'd want with that. And the Strike series, hell, I've even said with that, just leave the graphics as they are, just get it to run on a modern system. I'd even be happy with that with Road Rash, but in the spirit of the video, first person, not really. I think that would destroy the game, the essence of the game for what it was. But yeah, certainly I would say something like Desert Strike, Jungle Strike, Urban Strike, Soviet Strike, and Nuclear Strike. That was the other one on the PlayStation. Yeah, but they were kind of isometric. There's the game that's come out at the moment, but it's not part of that series. It's Code Hot. That's not an official game, but it's about as close as you're likely to get. yes, as close as you're likely to get at the moment, unless EA decide that they are going to go into that back catalogue. They would be superb. That's probably it. There's quite a few there, but you know, it's probably what I would suggest. To be honest, it's quite a bit there. As I say, some of them already have, you know, just in different forms. But if I was going to go for it in the spirit of the question, then those would be the games, and done that way as well. You know, if you're going to use, like, say, the Unreal Engine, fine, but I want the game to play. I want it to be the same game, is what I'm saying. I don't want, you know, some reimagining of the game, because that's not really in the spirit of it, and that does happen sometimes. There's one more, and I think this really would work in 3D, and it's a couple of games from the Commodore 64. And again, these were games that had multi-part levels to them. And it's a game that's often overlooked outside of the sort of, I guess, the retro enthusiasts. But it's a game that on both of these I spent a considerable amount of time playing. It's a game called Infiltrator. And Infiltrator 2 the next day. Brilliant. Part of the game you're flying in a helicopter to get to your objective. And then the other part of the game you're going around the base, swapping disguises and you know, basically trying to sabotage the enemy operations, base of operations. Brilliant couple of games. Now, omissions. Somebody's going to say, maybe Impossible Mission. No. I would hate that in 3D. That is a game that has to stay true to its form. In 3D, it wouldn't work. It just wouldn't. You'd lose the spirit of the game. So I would definitely say no to something like that. The challenge of that is the jumping onto the platforms. It's a platformer. You have to avoid the enemies. And the nature of its 2D-ness is critical. If you went 3D, I think you would lose too much from that game, to be honest. So yeah, I just thought I'd drop that one in at the end. But Infiltrator, definitely. Well, Infiltrator 1 and 2. So, I think we'll wrap it up there. I think we'll call it. It's been a while, got through this. Hope you enjoyed it all. And I'm going to head off because I can feel a few spots of rain. And I'll catch you all tomorrow where we'll talk about Quake. So I'll see you all then. Thanks for watching.